Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of the Oldish TV. What discussions are you putting off? Are you afraid to put them off? Discussions that you're afraid of having? That's what we're going to talk about today. And at the end of the show, I'm going to show you a post on the Oldish's Facebook page that has gone viral, and I couldn't be more tickled to see that people are paying attention to this. It's kind of been going on for a while, but I looked at the numbers, had a really good look at the numbers the other day. Makes me smile every time. My name is Karen, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of the Oldish TV. So, what discussions are you wanting to put off for another day? Maybe it has to do with driving. When you stop driving, if you stop driving. Maybe it's dating after the death of a partner. Maybe you want to travel to faraway places and you're afraid of having that conversation with your older adult children or with your best friends. You know, there are lots of people that we have discussions with. In a way, we're kind of accountable to our older children. We know they worry about us, and I don't mean to put too fine a point on it when I talk about accountability to them, but hopefully these are people that we keep in touch with, that care about us and we care about them. And whenever we contemplate big changes in our lives, we want our older children involved somehow. Sometimes it can be having their input on an issue. Sometimes we just want to inform them. But whichever way it goes in your discussions, they are sure to have some opinions, whether you want them or not. So maybe you don't want to hear the answers. Maybe you don't want to think about the questions. Maybe you don't think you're as old as all that. Maybe you don't want bad things to come up. Or maybe you don't think bad things will happen to you at all. Regardless, this is your life. And these discussions are kind of inevitable. And I know that many of you just put it off and put it off and put it off. Or you have the discussion and then you're sorry you had the discussion. You know, there are lots of good reasons for having these hard discussions and putting them behind you. There are also occasionally good reasons for putting off the discussion. For instance, maybe there's a family wedding coming up and you don't want to have this difficult discussion before the wedding because you don't want to rile up feelings that will carry over into the wedding and maybe spoil the day for everybody. That's fair. But at some point, all of these tough discussions need to be had. So why do people put off having these tough discussions? Well, they're worried. Usually they're worried. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or they don't want to have their own feelings hurt. People can be afraid of having their privacy invaded. That can happen, you know, when your older children, for instance, start asking questions. They don't live at home anymore. Maybe there are things about your life you don't want them to know, and that's fair. You're a grown adult, and you're entitled to your privacy. Maybe you don't want to share that with them. Maybe you're terrified of the discussion becoming emotional and dragging up past history that you thought had been put to bed. That's a reasonable discussion. Maybe this discussion has been had before, and you know exactly what the input will be, and you don't want to hear it again. That's fair too. What's the solution to that? The solution is to frame the discussion as a decision that you've already made. Not necessarily something where you're inviting participation in coming to the decision. There's a difference. If you're inviting input, you haven't really made the decision. But if the discussion is, here's my decision, and I want you on board with it, then the decision can be framed as something that you've thought about, and here's what you've thought about it, and here are the things you've considered, here are the actions you've taken. And you can take their questions. That's not the same thing as inviting their input to the actual decision itself. You understand that difference? Perhaps you don't understand the fears, your own fears or the fears of other people. The solution is to work through the issue first, like literally get out a piece of paper and write down the pros and the cons of every single component of that decision. That's something that can work really well, and especially when you want to bring that document with you to the discussion and you can show people that you've been very thoughtful about how you've reached this decision to assuage their fears. You know, we've talked about this before, where adult children can be very fearful about you remaining in your home, as a for instance, because what if this and what if that? You know, it can be very challenging. People have really genuine fears, but if you can show them that you've worked through every angle of this, it can be very helpful. May not make them any less fearful about the what ifs that they contemplate that are in the ether. You can't do anything about that, but you know, you can show people that you have worked through this in a very reasonable, thoughtful way, and that should be helpful. Maybe you want to avoid making anybody else angry with you. You know, not having the discussion doesn't mean that it's not happening somewhere else. And the best example I can give of this is by relaying a story that I had early on when I was on the board of a hospital that I sit on. And it was around whether or not the hospital should start a Facebook page. So obviously this goes back a few years. The president and chief executive officer of the day, who is no longer there, I think he's retired now, but regardless, his reason for not wanting a Facebook page was that we wouldn't be able to give people all the answers that they wanted. And he didn't necessarily want staff spending their time faced with the questions that other people in the community might have. At the time, I recall very vividly pointing out to him that just because we don't see what the discussions are doesn't mean that they're not happening. And guess where they happen? Up the road at the coffee shop. They happen. That you aren't there to participate in them doesn't mean the discussions aren't happening. So it's better that you are proactively involved in the discussions so that you can address the fears, so that they don't run wild with what ifs and all that nonsense. You know, it really can get quite a bit out of hand and become very unrealistic. But you also know what happens when people say the same thing over and over again? It becomes reality. It literally becomes reality to people. And once it is their reality, even if it's not yours, if it is their reality, it becomes tougher for you to bring things back into what your reality and what your life really is and what it's all about. So don't let the rumor mill or the speculation or the what ifs get out of hand. Deal with it proactively in front of them so that they're not dealing with their idea of your reality behind your back. Okay, you understand that? Are you making assumptions? Sometimes when we're fearful about having discussions, we're making assumptions about what other people will think or feel. And that might be unfair. It might be spot on. But regardless, if you're basing your fears of having the conversation or how you're going to frame the discussion about it on somebody else's assumption, you're giving them the power. Ah, you didn't think of that, did you? You give people power when you frame your reality around their assumptions or things that they may have said. Take the power back. This is your life. This is totally your life. If it's at all possible, break your discussion down into smaller pieces. It's like eating the whole pie at once versus eating a piece at a time. If you eat it a piece at a time, if you have that discussion a piece at a time, you're giving people the opportunity to absorb these small bits. And if the small bits sound reasonable, they can move on to the next bit. And before you know it, they've eaten the whole pie. And it's much more difficult for them to object to what you're saying because they've essentially agreed every step of the way with each piece of the pie that they have eaten. That's a good one. Some might think that eating those small pieces of pie let people make arguments against the small pieces. Don't fall into that trap. You've already made the decision, remember? You've made the decision. But even if you haven't, their objections to each small piece give you a chance to go back to your list and work through those pieces. You may find that some of those concerns that other people have some legitimacy. But if you can work through them and show that you have conquered this within your own life, that helps them accept your decision a little bit better. They don't have to like it. Remember that. They don't have to like your decision. It's your life. But it's ever so helpful if they understand why you made the decision that you made. Okay? So those little bites, you know, again, don't let their arguments for your life take away your power. If you work through things and you're content with the outcome of your research and your investigation and your going through the pros and cons, that's enough. It's your life. Keep that power to make decisions about your life. Now, I am the first one to say that you can't make somebody do what they don't want to do. So, in terms of a home that isn't safe, I'll jump in there and say, you might need to make some renovations or some home modifications. You might make a list of your intention and say how you're going to do this. How are you going to maintain the home? How are you going to get to the doctor? How are you going to visit your friends? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? They're like, there's a whole list of things. But if you've thought through it, and provided you are safe, because you understand your adult children and the other people who love you want you to be safe, right? They want you to be safe. If you've walked through it all and you take responsibility for everything, you maintain ownership of your own life. And that's really important that you should do that. Don't let yourself get dragged down a rabbit hole. So here's a for instance. Pretend scenarios that drag you off course. One of your adult children says, my friend at work, her father had this happen to them. I'm afraid that's going to happen to you. What if it happens to you? Well, is it grounded in reality? Is this something that has happened to you before? Is it a fear that they're inventing because it happened to somebody else? It's likely to happen to you. Those sorts of fear-based scenarios don't help you. We all want to wrap each other up in bubble wrap and protect each other from bad things happening. Don't you want to do that from the moment your children are born and you see them toddle away from you and go to school? Don't you want to wrap them up against falling on the schoolyard playground and having people say bad things to them and, all kinds of things that happen to them. And as they grow up, you want to protect them from gossip and you want to protect them from getting that bad job review. I mean, it never stops. We are just always wanting to protect the people we love from having bad things happen to them. Bad things are going to happen, but this is where you have a job to do. You need to sit down and evaluate your own life. And you need to come up with solutions to the problems that either do exist or may exist. Not to keep your children happy, but to make sure that you understand what it takes to keep you safe. You know your medical condition. You know how much exercise you get or don't get. You know what you need to stay healthy and well. So you need to come to terms with the things that you are willing to do to make sure that that continues to be the case. And if you have ownership of that, then you can say that to your adult children or to your friends or whoever is worried when you're in the process of explaining your decisions to them. Remember, you're not asking for permission. If you're asking for permission, that's a whole other thing. This whole video does not apply to you. This is not about asking permission. This is about taking ownership for your life, having the tough discussions with yourself so that you can have them with the people who love and care about you. That's what this is all about. Do the work, put the work into it, and understand that as circumstances in your life change, you will have to do more work to put things in place to make sure that you stay safe and well in a new environment. And then maybe next year something else happens and you've got another environment and, other decisions to make. But I am a big advocate for being proactive and making sure that you take responsibility for your life. Okay, now I want to show you this little piece. This is the World Health Organization's criteria that divides human beings into age groups: underage, youth, middle-aged, whatever. I am thrilled to bits to be middle-aged at this point in my life, but if you look off on the side, this is right now, as it's happening, there have been 27,000 shares of this post, 1.4 thousand reactions. I am really, really thrilled with this. This is a piece. Now, what I should do is put the comments to all comments. There we go. So you can see with all comments, there are things happening sort of constantly. Oh, we should maybe all comments newest. Show the comments first. There we go. That helps. So like an hour ago, people are still commenting on this, and I am just thrilled to see a post about older adults having this kind of circulation. 27,000 shares. Sometimes it's quiet for a while until somebody else discovers it and starts sharing, and that is what has happened recently. People have started to share this again. And look, we originally posted that February 16th, 2018. And here it is again, popping back up again. But I'm absolutely thrilled with that. If you have time, go back and find that post if you're interested. It is the World Health Organization's declaration of age groups, not mine, but I'm happy to support it. I'm happy to be middle-aged. Are you? Join us again next Wednesday for another edition of the Oldish TV. Until then, stay young, stay happy. Maintain ownership for your decisions and don't be afraid to have those tough discussions. Until next week, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and do remember that it takes a village to age a senior. Bye, everybody.